I'm so happy to be alive now and not when things were so primitive, whether it's our mating patterns and how they used to be, how we used to chase down prey and eat them, and what the age of metals looked like for tribes that did not have metals. We have all of that in today's most amazing top 10 list. Coming at number 10, we have hunting patterns. Early humans had a lot of different techniques that they could use to make sure that they were the ones on top of every creature. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been able to get to the point where we don't have to hunt anymore, and we're talking about cloning meat. Some of those factors were that humans can hunt in groups, that they can make weapons, and that they can throw spears over hands. All of these things were advantages over early hominids, but the most terrifying of all of them was the fact that early humans could run animals to death. A skill that humans have over other creatures is the ability to run long distances for extended periods of time. Other animals are much better sprinters, but something that separates us is the ability to run marathon lengths or longer. So a way humans would hunt would be to chase down its prey and have it sprint away, while humans were just jogging. When the animal thinks it's safe, it might relax for a moment, but then it would see humans approaching again, so it would sprint away again. The prey would once again settle down and then see humans running from far away. Early humans would literally run its prey to exhaustion because most animals don't sweat, so they overheat, collapse, and then become food. This process would sometimes take days. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming in at number 9, we have eradicated all the competition. There used to be a bunch of other species of human-like animals. Like, I'm sure that many of you have heard of Neanderthals. There's some people who have Neanderthal DNA. So if there was a bunch of human-like beings that were walking around the same time as us, how were we able to become the ones who came out on top? Well, one of the theories is that we were the best at warfare. All of the early Homo sapiens would go to war with the other species that were around them, and they took everyone out. I mean, they had some advantages that the others didn't. For instance, there was suspicion that they had the ability to throw spears overhead, which used to be the deadliest form of attack. Other species didn't have the dexterity for this, and that meant that they were easily wiped out, and back then we took no prisoners. Coming in at number 8, we have they were fueled by meat. There's a lot of evidence that meat combined with fire was the deciding factor in seeing humans evolve to stronger beings. See, humans were eating meat before we were able to use fire in a controlled sense to cook it, but we were eating raw meat, and when you're eating tons of raw meat, there's a higher chance that you're going to consume bacteria and parasites. So eating meat wasn't the safest, and our bodies needed longer digestive systems to digest this meat safely. This costs more calories, which is a precious resource for early humans. Now, when we started cooking meat, it meant that we could eat more of it and evolve to have smaller digestive tracts and bigger brains. So early humans were meat machines that were hungry to cook and burn all of the breathing creatures around them. Coming at number 7, we have sucking it dry. Now, as much as meat was a valuable source, it was still hard to get at times, and hunting was never easy. Hunter-gatherers are thought to have gotten 80% of their calories from gathering, but the early humans that were in charge of scavenging the land to find food did find a way to get some protein into the diet, and that was through bones. Scavengers would often bring back bones of dead animals, and humans found out that cracking the bones open and sucking the marrow out of them was a great source of protein. Actually, it's believed that for a long time, bone marrow was the main source of protein for early man. That is kind of a gruesome image to think of. A human cracking open the skull of another animal and sucking the marrow out of it like a gothic Capri Sun. But back then, you didn't have the fine skills of a barbecue pitmaster. Sucking on some bones must have been delicious and a delicacy of its time. You would have to fight off other creatures just so you could taste that good marrow. Coming in at number 6, we have rub some dirt on it. You know that old saying, rub some dirt on it. That's supposed to be a sign of grit, something that sounds ridiculous, something that won't actually do anything for you and will probably make you feel even worse than when you first got hurt. Well, it turns out it might actually help. It's thought that early humans would actually take clay and rub it on their open wounds to try and heal them. Now, this sounds crazy. Why on earth would they do something like that? Well, they didn't do it just because they didn't know that much about medicine. It turns out that rubbing clay on a wound actually has some pretty strong healing properties. It would not only help the wound heal, but it would keep out parasites and bugs and stop the smell from attracting predators. That's crazy when you think about it. Not not the fact that it actually works, but the fact that the saying rub some dirt on it actually has some medical backing. What about our other sayings like easy come, easy go? What does that even mean? Well, I know what it means, but does it mean something more? Coming in at number 5, we have they had no homes. Early humans would travel around constantly. They were what's called a nomad. They had no home and nowhere to come back to every day. Could you imagine that life now? Every day you got to find a new landlord, and the next day you spend finding another landlord. In between that, you would stop at Burger King to eat and then move on because someone took your favorite spot. The reason for this was food. As we've already covered, the main source of food for early man was gathering and hunting. Both these things involve moving great distances to collect as much food as possible and chase down animals. Now, it wouldn't make sense to travel hundreds of miles away from your home to get food and then burn all those calories to get back. So you would just set up shop in a new place and keep going. But once we figured out agriculture, then we would grow food in one place and start breeding livestock. Then we started sitting down a lot more and hanging out for most of the day. Coming in at number 4, we are evolving faster. Early humans were too slow. It took them 5 million years just to go from rocks to iPhone 12. If I were in charge of all of this, we would already have robots that we can go on dates with and junk food that is way healthier than salad. But for real, there are some scientists that not only believe we are still evolving, but we are evolving faster. We could in fact be evolving 100 times faster than when we first discovered agriculture. This seems strange to me because it would seem that we don't need to evolve anymore because science is evolving for us, but that could be exactly why we're evolving at such a high pace. We are now exposing our body and ourselves to so many new things, new foods, new information, new chemicals, new climates. Some of us are even going into space. The body is now in hyperdrive just to try and keep up with everything we're putting it through. Coming in at number 3, we have Homo sapiens were creatures of love. I don't mean that in the sense that they were all about peace. No, not at all. We already covered how early humans might have gone out of their way to take out every other human-like thing on the planet. But they also went out of their way to mate with all the other human-like species. Many people today have traces of other species in their body, like Neanderthals or Homo erectus and many others. So it would seem that some of us would want war and the others just wanted love, man. Now, why did humans have such an open door policy when it came to procreation? Well, we still don't know that. And it might give another answer as to what happened to all these other species. They might have just been bred out of existence. There's a chance that Homo sapien DNA was just that strong. And these other dudes got pushed out, just like how today blue eyes and red hair are starting to disappear. Coming in at number 2, we have they would banish you. There is a ton of evidence that shows early humans were very social animals. Way before we even knew how to build fires to hang around, we were gathering in groups. I wonder what we used to hang around before fires and water coolers. Maybe it was like a pile of bones or really cool rock. But because humans have always been such social animals, being sent out on our own would have been one of the worst punishments that you could ever receive. This would put you at risk for several reasons. For one, it would strain your mental health. I know that seems like a silly thing to say for early man, but they would be able to feel the stress of being alone for a long time. This would put them at the risk of dying from other animals. You would have no one to look over your shoulder, and predators always look for the weak one that's separated from the pack. But this would also make it hard for you to get food. You would have to scavenge all by yourself and it would be extremely hard to hunt. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the age of metals. There is a time in prehistory when early man discovered metal. This was pretty simple metal, but as you can imagine back then, this would have been like discovering the nuclear bomb. So there was a short period of time where there were certain tribes that had access to metal and other tribes were literally still using stones and sticks. Now, what do you think happened in that time? Do you think that they were nice and they went around showing everyone how to use these new metals so they could make the whole world a better place and we would one day all surf the internet? No way, Jose. During that time, there was massive bloodshed as tribes who had the edge knew what metal was and how to use it, and they would use it to attack the more primitive tribes. I mean, every time there's a technological advancement today, the same thing happens. Coming in at number 10, we have they might have mated with gorillas. gorillas. Now, on the first one of these videos, we covered the fact that early humans were deep in the dating game and had no interest in only sleeping with their own species. Thanks to the wonders of science, we've been able to discover that modern humans have traces of other prehistoric humans in their DNA, like Neanderthals and Denisovians. I wonder what Tinder looked like back before we had stone tools. Would you just whip a rock into a crowd and whoever got clocked in the head would be your date to the prehistoric prom? Now, it would seem that humans took it a step further and might have been hooking up with gorillas, and the evidence to back this up is the fact that humans have two very different kinds of lice on their body. While nearly every other mammal on this planet only has one type of creepy species of lice that likes to rummage through their hair, we have two. We have head lice and we have pubic lice. Can you guess which one of the two species of lice that we have on our bodies is the most similar to the lice found on gorillas? Yeah, it's pubic lice. Yeah, so if you wanted the image of a caveman kissing Harambe on the lips, I just brought it home to you.
Coming in at number 9, we have the fact that humans just died off. Now, of course, all the early humans are dead, unless the theories that some of the celebrities we see are immortals who rule the earth from a shadow government are true. But it's not so much that they died off, but that about 80,000 years ago, a bunch of them died off. It was one of the rare times in human history where we saw our numbers drop. I don't know if you've been paying attention to human nature, but we tend to spread faster than a video of Joe Biden tripping up the stairs. But for some reason, there was a force that caused the human population to drop drastically, and we have no idea what it was. Now, chances are it wasn't some war, there wasn't enough of us back then, and we were too stupid to be that organized. One of the more popular theories is that there was a massive volcanic eruption that caused a carpet of ash to cover the skies, which led to freezing temperatures and massive food shortages. Now, this is terrifying because what is stopping that from happening again? Is it someone's job to plug up all the volcanoes or vacuum up the sky if it's covered in smog cloud from hell? God, I hope so.
Coming in number 8, they had a wide range of expressions. Let's start with the cute ones before we move on to the dark ones. Humans were the first creatures that could blush, unless there was some dino that had rosy cheeks. But this was a way humans could show other creatures that they meant no harm. If you look into someone's big doe eyes and they have cheeks that are flush, it doesn't really look like they want to kill you. This primal form of expression is how we were able to communicate with other tribes before we could send texts saying I'll be there in 10 minutes. Now, this wasn't the only way that humans could convey their emotions. There's a reason that showing your teeth and furrowing your brow is a signal of aggression. Early humans most likely had to use this face to tell people that it was time to fight, and it would seem that we never lost that ability. Batman is the perfect representation of brow furrowing still being alive and well today.
Coming in at number 7, we have the fact that we lowered our voice box. Now, this wasn't the choice of early humans, it just kind of happened. See, there's something very interesting about humans that seems like a design flaw. When we look at a lot of other primates and monkeys, we find that they have a much higher voice box. Now, this makes it pretty much impossible for them to talk, but it also prevents them from choking. See, because we have a voice box that is so low, it is much easier to choke. So at some point in our evolution, early man started to live a life that prioritized talking over choking to death. Great. Now, to be fair, it is still pretty hard to choke to death. It does happen, but it's not a commonality. Really, we just need to take smaller bites. And to think we chose the small bites so Fergie could one day make Fergalicious, yeah, I would say that's definitely worth it.
Coming in at number 6, they had a pretty small dating pool. It's great that now you can go on a plethora of dating apps and find your soulmate without even getting out of bed. But back when we were dragging our knuckles through the mud, we weren't so fortunate. It would seem that early humans had to put a lot more effort into finding someone to reproduce with, and there was a lot less of them to do it with. If we're going to look through our genetic diversity, we are going to find something very strange, that we have some of the lowest amount of genetic diversity of any ape, which makes me wonder, how were we able to make it this far? Well, because we have this information, it leads us to the question of why do humans have such a small pool of genes jiggling around in our bodies, and that is simply because the entire human race probably came from a small tribe in East Africa that was only about 15,000 people. Let me say that again, there's over 7 billion people on this planet, and they are the offspring of a group of 15,000 people. There were 150,000 people just in the suburb I grew up in. Would you really want to be the guy who screwed up on the hunt and then every human in the world would find out that you suck? You would never get a date again.
Coming in at number 5, it's the fact that we crossed the ocean. Here's something crazy. Early humans all started in Africa, and once they decided that they wanted to move out of the original basement, they trekked around the world, and that's how we've been able to cover the world with pizza, K-pop, and fancy clothes. But how the hell did early humans make it to Australia 50,000 years ago? Well, they did it in boats, my dude. They jumped in boats before they even had GPS or a Sudoku book to pass the time. And they set sail to find out who knows what. They crossed the ocean on something that Bear Grylls could have built with a shoestring and some bamboo shoots. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but it would seem that would be the only logical answers as to how they made it there, which is one of the most impressive feats imaginable. Unless you're a flat earther and you don't believe Australia is real and that everyone on the kangaroo continent is an actor, can we address how stupid that is for a moment? And who was the budget for this, and are people writing a script for what goes on down there? Zack Snyder jumped off of the Justice League and farted out the timeline for Australia 2021.
Coming in at number 4, we have they gave us lower back pain. I mean, they didn't really do this on purpose. There wasn't some early human scientist who was thinking, I hate the future and I want everyone there to suffer and need to see a chiropractor. No, it was much less intentional. See, early humans used to spend their days walking around on all fours like we see with most other primates. They also had to hunt and travel to get food, which was very demanding work, which gave us strong bodies that had thick bones and a posture that was constantly leaning over so we could walk on our hands. Then we, for whatever reason, started to walk upright. I don't know whose idea this was. Whoever thought 2 legs was better than 4 is dead wrong. But it's okay because we still had strong muscles and thick bones to support our new lifestyle. But then we invented agriculture and we started to become much more sedentary. So now our bodies are soft and we're walking upright, which puts a ton of stress on our lower back and hips. So unless you're hitting your yoga every other day, you're gonna see your joints wear and tear like the crotch area on your jeans. Why couldn't these dudes just stay down on their hands so I didn't have to see an osteopath every 3 weeks?
Alright, coming in at number 3, we have the fact that they were the bringers of death. This should come as a surprise to no one, but humans are very good at killing. It doesn't matter if it's plant life, animal life, human life, or the entire planet itself, we are finding new and inventive ways to create death. And just so you know, this is nothing new. Early humans found so many different ways to hunt and bring destruction. Back then it was more for survival. No one was trophy hunting. But there are tons of tools like clubs, spears, and hatchets that some of our ancestors would use while they were tracking down their prey. Some of the more inventive things that have been discovered are fishing rods and nets. And it would seem that some of the weaponry and hunting tools that early man was able to make was more advanced than we originally thought.
Coming in at number 2, we have the death throw. I know this sounds like a move from a cheesy kung fu movie, but it was actually one of the key elements that led to Homo sapiens' ability to take over the world. We can throw better and faster than pretty much any other animal on the planet. I'm sure if you trained a chimp to throw a ball its whole life, it could do a better job than a pitcher on sheer strength, but it doesn't come to them naturally. See, humans found out they could whip almost anything like a slug firing out of a shotgun, and this gave us an edge to start taking over. We would first use rocks, but quickly found out that pointy rocks on the end of a stick, aka a spear, would have some of the most stopping power of all time.
And coming in at number 1, we have cannibalism. So it would seem that not everything ancient humans ate were foliage and animals. There were certain tribes that got so hungry they had to turn to munching on other humans to survive. There's a lot of evidence that shows some human tribes would practice cannibalism, and that this isn't just for survival, but a preferred way to live? I guess you could go to war to gain a new territory and then eat all the bodies after. That's what you could call killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Well, why did these brutal traditions not make it to the modern era? Well, other than it being insane and terrifying, cannibalism has some pretty devastating effects on the body. It does a number on the digestive system and can cause the brain to rot. That's where things like mad cow disease came from. Farmers were feeding dead cows to living cows and started a new illness. So most of these human-eating humans would have died off because their bodies couldn't manage their destructive lifestyle. I wonder if that's the same for tequila?
We live in a time now where if you get hurt or sick, you can walk down to the doctor and then they'll patch you up as good as new. Well, it depends on how much you take care of your body. If you get a stomach ache and then the doctor gives you something to feel better, but then you go home and keep eating Doritos, your body isn't really going to heal, but you'll still be better off than early humans were. Back then, if you sprained your ankle, they would leave you on a rock to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. There would have been no comeback story. It was one and done. In fact, the life expectancy for early humans was somewhere in their late 30s. That means you had to get your life together fast. I might have already been an elder in my tribe or almost dead by the time I reached this stage of my life. I would probably be walking with a limp and too weak to fight. It wouldn't be long before I'd be sentenced to death by being left behind like the third dude on the sidewalk. And there would be good reason for this. If it wasn't an injury that would get you, it would be some sort of insect or infection. There was a little chance that you would be able to avoid the many things in the prehistoric world that would be trying to kill you at all times.
In our number 9 spot today, we have the Venus of Willendorf. If you've never heard of it before, the Venus of Willendorf is a small figurine that is said to have been made around 30,000 years ago, and it was one of the first cultural items that was found from the Paleolithic era. This specific figurine is similar to others that have been found from the same era as well, but this specific one was found during an excavation in 1908. These figurines are depictions of a nude female body, but there are most definitely some exaggerations. Some researchers believe that these figurines may have been a representation of a mother goddess and would be used as a symbolic fertility totem, but some people believe that these figurines were more of a form of erotic art. There is, however, one more theory about these figurines. It is believed by some that they were created by female artists who were looking down on their bodies. This theory says that this would be the reason there wouldn't be a face included on the figurine, as there were no mirrors for them to clearly see their own reflection.
Coming in at number 8, we have crossover episode. Early humans were very territorial creatures, but they weren't dumb. Well, they weren't dumb compared to the creatures that were around back then. If we were to introduce them to today's society, they wouldn't be giving a lecture on the simple ways of hunting and gathering. What I mean by they weren't dumb is that they understood that they were much weaker than a lot of the other creatures that were around them, and they would need to work together if they wanted to take them down for food. This meant that they would often encounter other humans while they would be walking around and hunting, and instead of instantly getting into a fight over the hunting territory, they would join forces to wage war on larger edible mammals. Their communications would have been very basic. They probably were mainly using body language and a very simple system of grunts to get their point across, which isn't hard to believe. If you've ever been traveling, then you know you can find a way to talk to people without any sort of common tongue. Now this would be terrible for all the animals in the area. You would now have a team up of prehistoric avengers.
In our number 7 spot today, we have extracurriculars. There are illicit substances that have been made by humans, but there are also some that are naturally occurring from nature and our earth. In today's world, drugs are a pretty controversial topic, regardless of the source that they come from, but looking back at our early human ancestors, these things were certainly not as complicated as they are now. There's evidence that has shown researchers that early humans were inhaling drugs before drugs was even a word. There's evidence that they would inhale hallucinogenic smoke through bowls and tubes that they created themselves, which would be used to send them into spiritual trances. Of course, this practice has become more taboo in our modern society, but there certainly is something to be said for how far back these practices date. I have a lot of questions as to how the early humans discovered these things in the first place, but I guess most of their time was spent discovering new things, which is honestly pretty cool. I also want to know how the first human who ever tripped out reacted. There is also apparently evidence that shows that the early humans also created their own alcohol. There's a site in Cyprus that dates back 11,000 years ago that researchers believe was used as a ceremonial site and also as a kind of prehistoric brewery.
Coming in at number 6, we have more hunting patterns. We talked about in part 1 of this list how some early humans would hunt. They would use their marathon running ability to literally run animals to exhaustion, having a beast sprint until it couldn't run any further and then drop down dead. But that wasn't the only way they were able to bring death to all the animals and creatures around them. A very popular form of hunting was just being the sneakiest dude in town, hiding in the bushes for hours until some unsuspecting animal got too close. You would then jump jump out and drive your spear through its head and bring it to the ground. This hunting technique could have been performed by small groups of hunters, but if you wanted to bring down something bigger, well then it was going to take a tactic that might have been a little more brutal. It was thought that early humans would chase things down like woolly mammoths and push them to the edge of a cliff. A group of them would then pressure the animal until it got scared and tumbled to its death. You could then go to where the creature fell down and it would be bon appetit.
We have the waiting game. I know we've talked about hunting a few times, but this is just another one of those sneaky guy hunting methods that used to be used thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, hunting larger animals and prey has become significantly easier as we have high-powered machines that allow us to take out animals that are much larger than us. But of course, this wasn't always the case. You know the phrase, work smarter, not harder? Well, early humans had that down as they would hide away, waiting for some form of a large predator to come and take down a prey that would be too big for humans to conquer. After this, they would wait for the large predator to leave, which is when they would go and scavenge the remains of the animal for food. This certainly wasn't the most common hunting tactic, as humans had different taste preferences than, let's say, a lion. Like, a lion doesn't really care what age their prey is, but it has apparently been shown that early humans preferred their meat to have been in their prime of adulthood before becoming their meal. But hey, beggars can't be choosers.
Coming in at number 4, we have cancer was still a problem. We like to think that one of the biggest killers of modern man is something that is new, and it's been brought on by our overindulgence in chemicals and from having extremely poor diets. Did you know that eating fried food leaves your body more inflamed than smoking a cigarette? That's pretty wild. But back to my point. Even though some of our modern tendencies have exacerbated how much cancer we are seeing develop in people, that doesn't mean that the disease is brand new. An archaeological dig in Kenya showed that early humans had lumps in their bodies that were most likely cancer tumors. There would have been no way to fight this back then, and it would have probably led to death in every case.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the tattooed mummy. If mummies are something you're into, that's a little weird, but you may have also heard of Otzi the Iceman. Otzi was found in the Alps and is the earliest natural human mummy ever found in Europe, which is actually kind of cool. I mean, maybe not for Otzi, but it's an interesting fact for sure. Anyways, there was of course a lot of research done on him after his discovery, and one thing that was very notable was the fact that he had a total of 61 tattoos on his body. That is probably not anything crazy for us today, but all things considered, this was a lot of tattoos for someone during the time that he lived in. Most of the tattoos were difficult to see at first, which seems pretty fair considering the fact that he lived thousands and thousands of years ago and the fact that his body is now mummified. While the idea of him having tattoos is certainly very interesting, researchers believe that the tattoos were actually done as an attempt at pain relief, sort of like a prehistoric version of acupuncture that used fireplace ash. It's honestly kind of sad to think of him as being in pain so often that he needed 61 different tattoos, all of which were gone over multiple times on different occasions.
Coming in at number 2, we have climate change forced innovation. Seeing the beast of climate change that is coming over the horizon makes you wonder if we're going to be able to beat it and strive to be alive another day. Are we going to be able to come up with a way to best the biggest threat that we have seen in recent years? I think we will. Honestly, I think I'm going to change so little about my lifestyle that I won't even notice that there was a change when the world is just fixed. That's what happens with most of my problems. And if history is right, then that's exactly how things should play out. It would seem that climate change has been something that our ancestors have faced before, and every time they've come up with a new and innovative way to combat these changes and survive. So we just gotta pull it off one more time and we're good, baby.
And in our number 1 spot today, we have these prehistoric medical practices. There's never been a great time in history to be in need of medical attention, but from my limited medical knowledge and all the medical advancements we have made, I feel like now is probably a better time than the rest of history. This, however, has of course not stopped people from seeking out medical attention because of course, you have to at least try. Well, as it turns out, there's actually some pretty interesting evidence suggesting the ways that some early humans gave themselves stitches, as well as some evidence on some form of prehistoric brain surgery, if you can believe that. Trepanation is a procedure that involves forming holes in the human skull. This is definitely a thing that was quite common among early humans, but it is highly debated why. Some researchers believe that it was a spiritual practice, but some swear that it was a form of brain surgery. In terms of stitches that were used by early humans, this is a fact that really grosses me out, and it unfortunately involves ants. People would hold an ant above their open wound and wait for the ant to bite the wound with its pincers. After the ant grabbed on, they would then remove the head of the ant so that the pincers would stay in place like a stitch. Honestly, after reading this, I really hope that this was one of the times that the internet was lying to me, and if it's not, I feel incredibly grateful that today's version of Stitches doesn't involve bugs.
Alright, that's all we have for you today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the list. I'm your host, Jade Reyna.
I'm Olivia Kozlowski.
We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Sad, we're dead though.
So is that fried food thing true?
It is. Apparently, if you eat like a plate of fries, you stay in flame for like 2 days, and smoking a cigarette, you stay in flame for like 48 hours.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, did you just say 2 days and 48 hours? Because that's the same thing.
No, 4 to 8 hours.
Oh, I thought you said 48. I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense.
It's the same.
I think that's how you say it. Oh, God.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.